Welcome, everyone, to our latest edition of Life Guides Connect. I am Dr. Dave Hester. I appreciate you all being here with us today, and shout out to everybody watching on the archives. Hope you're having a good day. Today, we'll be talking about embracing change, and I have two wonderful ladies with me who I'll introduce in just a moment. But before introducing, I want to say to everyone to please like, share, subscribe. We now have a YouTube channel. You can find us Life Guides on everything, including LinkedIn. Please share with your friends, especially if you found this information to be helpful to you and it could potentially be helpful to others. So again, as I said before I get started, I want to say a thank you to one of the architects who helped support and develop what was Thrive Time and is now called Life Guides Connect. Sharon Stevens, thank you so much for your help with getting us to where we are. We appreciate all that you've done, and we to send you love and light as you take your next step in your journey. So let's go ahead. We'll be getting started in just a few moments. Let me give everybody a few minutes to settle in, and while everyone's settling in, I am going to go over a quick bio on myself and the ladies with me today. So, as I mentioned earlier, I am Dr. Dave Hester, one of the leaders here at Life Guides, dedicated to just helping the people who are suffering and dealing with just the most unique challenges and sometimes the most common challenges. I've been blessed to be a part of this organization, and I want to start by introducing Gretchen Grove. Gretchen Grove is a Korean American single mother with a heavy focus on breaking generational barriers and social stigmas, and practices change maker leadership every day, both at work and at home. She has given back to her Phoenix community and supported the unhoused, people with disabilities, underprivileged children, and incarcerated women. Gretchen is a leader at Life Guides as the head of client success to support Life Guides customers as well as the community members. Thank you so much, Gretchen, for being a part of this conversation.
Thanks for having me.
Outstanding. And next, and I'm so excited yet again, you might be the most, yeah, you might have been here on this program the most out of anyone else, which we're probably just going to make you co-host at this point. And, we'll dovetail it right out into you. So I'm talking about Hannah Rose Higdon. She is a client success manager here at Life Guides, as well as a certified life guide. She's a Native American Lakota and grew up on the Cheyenne River Sioux Reservation. Hannah Rose has shown true perseverance as a deaf individual living in a predominantly hearing world. She regularly volunteers by giving back to the deaf community. She is a deaf advocate and brings her unique insights and abilities to help people create a more inclusive world through educating others. Hannah, welcome back.
Always glad to be here, Dave. I feel like this is my third Life Guides Connect / Thrive Time appearance, so glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
Outstanding. So let's have this conversation. This is going to be one of the times where we deviate from the typical path because we're just going to really have a conversation about change. As I started out, I talked about Sharon. Sharon was a part of the organization where everyone's going through change, and not just change internally at home, but change at work. Change is a constant. If you haven't heard that before, get familiar. Change is a constant. It's going to happen. Things will never really stay the same. So as I thought about and researched a little bit around change, I found that change management, specifically when it comes to organizations who are implementing new strategies or if you're working on new ways to improve your culture, typically there's a little bit of strain with change. And I found some similarities in the physiological changes that our body goes through every 9 years, replicating and replacing cells from neurogenesis to how we create new connections in our brains. Even when people are just working out heavily and trying to get get that pump in. Shout out to those who know. Sometimes formerly known as gains for you 90s and early aughts people. So so everything requires a little bit of extra uh, tension sometimes, and it's a good thing. And I think sometimes we run away from that tension. So that is kind of the first question I wanted to throw to you two. I'm going to start with Hannah. Can you share an experience where there was a change in your life and there was tension, but you knew that that tension was going to get you through it, and as on the other side, a better person.
Great question, Dave. We're throwing the big shots right in the beginning. So
We're
I'm glad.
going straight for the home run. You know how we do.
Well, I'm excited to answer that for you. And to start with, I want to say happy Disability Pride Month to everyone. It's my favorite month. I'm so glad to be a part of this community and to be able to highlight on that. And that goes into my answer to this question as well. When you look at change, when you look at how your life changes, how you navigate through different things, the biggest change that I've ever gone through is actually becoming deaf. So I was not born deaf. I became deaf officially when I was 20 years old, but I have been hard of hearing my entire life with a moderate hearing loss. And when you go through those kinds of changes, it's hard. It's different. It's why can't I hear anymore? Why can't I do the things that I used to be able to do? Or, why am I not normal? It also goes into the idea of changing who you see yourself as a person. So for me, I had to transform into, not why did this happen to me, but more so, how can I navigate this? How does this benefit me? And actually, once I changed my mindset from, why did this happen to, how can I navigate life now? It really opened my eyes to make my world just a much better place. Through this experience, I'm able to be more inclusive. I'm able to have more knowledge. I'm able to navigate the world in a complete different way that I couldn't navigate it before. And I also get the opportunity to learn. And we get that opportunity a lot when we have change come at us. We get the chance to say, hey, I might be coming from a less educated place, but with these new things, I can learn about this community. I can learn how to navigate life in this way. And so I feel the biggest change I went through was definitely transitioning from being a hearing individual or having a moderate hearing loss or severe hearing loss into being completely deaf. And then where I'm at now, where I have cochlear implants, those transitions for me have really just changed the biggest change in my life and navigating that through, not only how I see myself, but also how other people see me too. Because you kind of have to create that narrative around yourself so that people know how to view you, what to think, and then also challenge those narratives that people have about you. Just because I'm deaf doesn't mean I can't do things, right? The only thing I can't do is hear. And that's one of my favorite quotes, is because a lot of people think, oh, if you're deaf, you can't do anything else, right? And I'm here to challenge that narrative. And I'm glad to have that conversation and discuss that further with you guys as well. So great question, Dave. And I'll pass it back to you or to Gretchen if she wants to speak on anything as well.
Gretchen, yeah, if you feel so inclined, please share, any type of uh, changes that you've gone through that you can note that definitely helped you to become who you are now.
Yeah, absolutely. I love hearing your story, Hannah Rose. So thank you for always shedding more light on you being a part of the deaf community. So thank you for that. I'll be somewhat brief with both. I have two different situations that I normally like to bring up, and I try to bring these up in the most positive way, because again, when it comes to change, a lot of times change can come at you way out of the blue when you least expect anything to be happening. And then all of a sudden you're forced to pivot, you're forced to move in a different direction. And a lot of times that force should be seen as a good force, which again, back to the point of your question, Dave, is something that causes you to then transform in a different way, doing something different than you're used to. And I would say that the two that are most significant to me are, from a personal relationship standpoint, is my ex-husband, the father of my child. When I decided to leave that marriage, I was making a choice better for myself, for me as a human, and then also for me as a parent. It was a very hard choice, and then it also came down to some of the things like, oh, going from a two income home to a one income, and now I'm paying for everything, right? And that the financial struggle that people experience, and that a lot of times because of that, that tends to like maybe delay taking the action of actually leaving a relationship, is because of knowing how difficult the financial situation might be. So that did hold me back for a period of time, but ultimately that making that choice forced me to pick everything up and really figure out what I need to do, what are the steps that need to be taken, who am I? Let's rediscover who I am as a human myself, and then let's take all that and take the steps forward to be better, a better human, and a better mother, and then also a better friend and a better coworker to people. You know, things like that. It really affected positively a lot of the other relationships that I had in my life. And it also got me on the path of understanding mental health, emotional well-being even more. And then I'll fast forward to the second, I guess, kind of life-changing thing that I would bring up is the fact that when COVID happened, I was working for a small boutique company. COVID happened, and then my boss at the time could no longer afford me. So I was laid off. And that was tough. So I was unemployed for 5 months. For a period of time, I took that as kind of like a let me go ahead and just take this time and enjoy and not have to worry about work. It was tough for me because I love working, but that 5 months definitely allowed me to show up for my son even more. I was with him quite often. And then, of course, he was doing school from home virtually because of COVID. So there was a lot of different kind of adventures and exploration that we had. And then that 5 months though, and that time of not working, that forced me to really figure out what do I want to do? What kind of job do I even want to have? And I was like, let me be more intentional with what kind of position and company that I would like to find. And I don't know if I'm being biased, but then all of a sudden I found LifeGuides and then I applied for the job and I got it. And I will say that because of COVID and losing my job and being unemployed for that period of time, I was really able to focus on what I wanted, what I needed, be able to focus on my family, and then ultimately, I was able to find such an incredible organization to work with and work for. So I would say that those are probably the most important pieces to me in terms of what forced me to change for the better.
No doubt. Changes, are constant. I'm going to say that throughout this. So if you are upset at hearing it, you're going to, feel it a little more, say it a little more. And what I'm hearing from both of your stories is that you made choices throughout those changes. We have agents. Sometimes we feel that we don't have power when change happens, and that can happen in the sense of in the work environment. We're talking about the work environment, what happened with your pivot, and we sometimes aren't in control, but there are pieces that we can control. So I want to talk a little bit because the people who we serve, the people who we support are people organizations, people leaders, and they're dealing with massive change, be it from layoffs or just dealing with the economic climate, uh, or just the climate. Pretty, shout out to people in Vermont right now dealing with one of the largest floods in 100 years. And all over, people are having to deal with change. So let's say you're, hypothetically a person at work and uh, all of a sudden you're tasked with making a very hard decision that's going to affect thousands of lives. Changes like that really can linger and affect others. So how would you approach that? Of course, this is a complete hypothetical, so fill in. It's more of those one of those yes and things. So let's see where it goes as we build this world.
Well, I would say a lot of that would be listening, especially to that amount of people, is really being open and listening to the different perspectives of others, and just hearing them, whether they have something that they need actual help with, like help me change this, help me improve this, or if it's just that they need to vent, whatever it might be. I think first we have to listen to what the people are saying, what they're in need of, and then go from there. And then I think there's a collaborative aspect to it. And I will say, because I've had the pleasure of working with both of you here at Life Guides, I feel like that we practice that quite often internally as well. We listen to each other internally, but then we also listen to all of our client, or the points of contacts from our clients. We listen to a lot of the member feedback, the guide feedback. We're constantly trying to collect as much information and perspectives and feelings and just providing that safe space for people to share. And again, however they want to share, I think that's really kind of where it starts. But I'd like to hear more from you, Hannah.
That's a really great point, Gretchen. I want to add on to that and say it's also the transparency and the honesty. It's being honest with your people. It's having those conversations and saying, asking the difficult questions. I know no one wants to, ask the tough questions, but when you're in that position, you have to. You have to ask those tough questions, whether the response is something you want or something you don't want to hear. You still have to take that response and say, okay, what can we work on to make this better? How can we make this company better and do things so that we are a collective goal to make people happy? And you can't make everyone happy, but what you can do is you can be empathetic. You can listen. You can say, I hear you. You can be transparent about what's going on. And I think those are the biggest things that people look for, and also things that we embody within Life Guides ourselves, just to try to make sure that people can hear that, hey, we still care about you. We're still here. We're going through this change, but just because we're going through that change doesn't mean that our core values are changing. It just means that we're, experiencing some turbulence, right? We're going through that difficult time, but as long as we're on the same page, we can navigate that successfully together.
Nice. That reminds me of it was kind of a joke or a quip someone shared about flying in a plane, and that when you feel the bumps, it's just they imagine that it's the train tracks, on as if you're on a train because you're kind of in a metal cylinder flying through the air, and that you're going to feel the bumps on train tracks, and so that's what they see it as, and that's all in reference to the destination. You're on your path to a destination. There might be some bumps, you might feel some dips, but typically you're going to reach it, and you know that part of the journey sometimes is forgotten, sometimes remembered, depending on how you process, you know, process experience or even label trauma. And either way, you still end up at the same location. Um, you're both talking about, with what you've seen at Life Guides, psychological safety in the workplace, which is something new that I've come across as far as how to build that into everything you do. You talked about core values. Core values are definitely important, and I'll go as far as to say to people with, if you have an ERG or even if you still have a DEI support, to connect with them, because right now is the opportunity to see the biggest growth. So let me ask you both a question about psychological safety. How do you build psychological safety at home and at work? We all also, have home lives as well.
I will kind of go back to my what I said previously in terms of listening. That's the biggest thing, is saying, I'm here. How can I help? Do you need to vent? Do you need an actual solution? Okay, let's be solution oriented. What can we do? Is it a temporary band-aid, or is it like a full final, like full-fledged solution that we need to look into? What are our barriers? What are the obstacles in order to find what that solution might be? A lot of it is asking questions. A lot of it is listening, from a parental aspect, because when it comes to embracing change and you're a parent, oh my gosh, you're going through so many changes as a parent, watching your little one go through so many changes, and that it changes the home environment as well. I will say again, listening and asking questions, but also giving choice. I will say that I provide my son with a lot of choice, and I know there are some parents who might disagree with this. So, I'll give an example. Typically every single summer, every 4th of July, we go back home to Michigan and visit family. And it's nice. We're on the lakes. It's summertime. Summer in the Midwest is amazing. All the things, right? But my son, he wanted what he calls a chill summer. He didn't want to travel a lot. He was like, I'm so tired. Summer is so short for us here in Phoenix. We only have like 8 weeks of summertime between school. And so he's like, I just want to chill summer. I don't want to do anything. And I'm like, okay, then that means you don't want to go to Michigan. And I was sad. That was a big change for me, because I'm like, every year we go. What is going on? I want to go home. But he didn't want to go. But I gave him the choice. And I said, okay, if we don't go to Michigan, then these are the options that what we have. What would you like to do? And I gave him more choice to say, okay, this is what I would like to do, or no, I don't want to do this. He might not always get his way, though. That's the other thing. So that's why you don't offer choices that you're not willing to give. But sometimes, again, even if it's as simple as, what to make for dinner, some people are like, oh, my kid doesn't choose what they want for dinner. I'm like, well, what's in your cupboard, what's in your fridge? Are you willing to make enchiladas tonight, or are you willing to make spaghetti? And then whatever is available, just give them the option between just those two, and that's it. But giving them choice really makes them feel comfortable as if they're a part of it, and as if what they say matters and it is valued. And especially when you execute on that and you follow through with the choice that they have made, then it makes them feel safe and comfortable, and as if, like, okay, the next time I know I can still make more choices, I will be offered choices, and whatever I choose could potentially be followed through on. So again, that builds trust as well, that so now he's going to trust that I will follow through on my actions as well.
No question. What I'm hearing there from you as well is it sounds similar to the work environment.
Yeah.
If you give someone the opportunity to share and they see that they're heard, and then there is actual steps or actions following that, they'll feel more comfortable sharing next time. They'll feel more comfortable and more appreciated. Uh, so, same thing to you, Hannah. Of course, specifically focusing on work, though. How do you build psychological safety? Just within your relationships as well. If you don't mind sharing.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question, Dave. And I really appreciate your insights, Gretchen. And I want to build off of that. So, when we look at psychological safety, it's one of those things where we can't just talk about it. We also have to walk the walk, so to speak. So, it's not just saying, oh, what are your ideas? What are you thinking? It's also creating that safe space internally so that people feel comfortable coming forward with those ideas. So, it's saying, okay, I'm going to facilitate everyone speaking up, show genuine curiosity, and then also be honest with your people too, and say, we're open to all kinds of ideas. Ironically, I've worked with Gretchen, I've worked with you before. And I know something that we've done is, tell us your ideas. We say, speak your ideas, tell them, even if they're bad, well, at least have them. So we encourage that, even bad ideas, all ideas, to come out there, and then also make active change to say, hey, this isn't a really good idea. Here's why. Here's feedback on how we can make that a better idea, but also doing it in a constructive and genuine way where people don't feel like they're being slighted or pushed to the side. But it's also being that solution oriented of saying, okay, we don't like that. This is why we don't like it. How do we move forward from here? So, psychological safety for me is also just listening to people. So, me as a deaf individual, lots of people are able bodied in our community. They don't necessarily know how difficult it is for me to navigate my day as a deaf individual. I have a transcript here at the bottom so that I can keep along and keep on base with what you guys are saying. So those things, it's little steps like that, those little extra things that I have to do so that I can effectively communicate with you guys and also, play at the same level as you guys. So I think it's important to listen to what other people have to say and say, hey, I need the closed captioning on for this. And then it's also taking that and saying, oh, thank you for sharing your experience. Let's add that in. And so I feel really comfortable with saying psychological safety of, making sure that people can come forward with those things, whether it be someone with a different ability, or it be, hey, maybe a person of color saying, hey, I don't feel that comfortable with this comment that was made. It's allowing that space and then not taking it on the defensive. It's saying, hey, we made a mistake. Thank you for educating us. How do we move forward from here as a collective whole so that we can all collectively be a more inclusive group and make sure that everyone feels included?
Inclusiveness, I actually, as I look for a quick resource I'll share with everybody, inclusiveness is one of the first steps in building psychological safety. And for those of you who are just coming around to inclusivity and finding the intersectionality of different people, because we all have varying experiences, it is really the spice that makes your pot or your dish that you're making delicious. You need these different perspective people who have what Frida and Mitch Kapoor called, distance traveled. Your distance traveled is important, and sometimes, especially in organizations, there some organizations are less likely to take risks. So I mentioned that purposefully to highlight a couple of organizations that are really no longer here in some ways, like Kodak, for example, where embracing change was not their top priority. They did what they did. They didn't take that necessary risk, and in not taking that risk, the market shifted without them. You could say the same thing for some of those former tech giants. For anybody over the age of 25, you remember organizations like Lycos or uh, AskG or something like that, but no one remembers those as much as they do the ones that embrace risk. So, talking about change, change takes risk because you don't know exactly what's going to happen. So I'm going to share a story real quick about a risk I took, and then I'd like to hear a risk that both of you took during your life. So flashback, it's this wonderful time called 2000. Ooh, so crazy. Anyway, I chose to make a choice. As Hannah mentioned, this is Disability Pride Month. I am living with two invisible disabilities, and what I chose to do was move from the typical special education classes into generate. I call it Gen Pop, which is kind of prison talk, but don't quote me on that. But to move to general pop school and then on to honors and AP. That was what I wanted to do. I just wanted to see how far I could do it rather than staying in one class. It came with an enormous risk. One of the largest risks was that there was concern I was going to fail, and not just fail like, oh, you messed up, but fail and then not graduate and be on a different track. And instead, because of that risk, I took the opportunity to learn about myself. I like that this is the through line that I'm hearing from everyone is learning about yourself and also how others see you. Sometimes asking for strong, direct, and constructive criticism from others who see you is important, especially if you're at a place where you can internalize it and in a way that's healthy and not in a way that you're going to judge yourself or you're going to judge them for being direct or clear with you, but instead say, this is awesome, I can take this and be better than I was yesterday. So fast forward here now, but that was a risk that I took during my youth, and it paid off big. So yeah, tell me about a risk that you took that during a change in your life and it paid off.
I will go back. I would say the biggest risk that I took was to leave my marriage. There was so much uncertainty for me. I also, from a financial standpoint, at that point in time, felt so unsafe, unsecure in knowing what could potentially happen. But then again, I felt unsafe and insecure if I would have stayed in the marriage too. So it was kind of like I'm risking it either way, right? So there was uncertainty regardless. And ultimately I was able to confide in some of my mom and one of my brothers, and a couple close friends who I felt safe with, and made the decision. And then of course when made the decision and started executing on it, I recognized too that I had a flood of support, and there was a lot of people there who were understanding of the situation. And I do feel like that was something where it was nice to have that obviously as a support, but it was kind of like I wouldn't have recognized this support if I wouldn't have made the choice. So the risk that I took in that choice, there was so much positive that kind of came out of that afterwards. And so I felt like at that time I was risking it for the biscuit. I was so scared. I didn't know what to expect. And I think a lot of people experience that. There's so much uncertainty, right? But because you're making a choice is change. And that from there you just have to be unassuming, because I think that's the other thing too, is when we get stuck, we usually get stuck is because our brain is like automatically calculating all the different scenarios and what if this and what if that, but maybe it could happen like this, but what if it doesn't, and oh my god, and then you just kind of stay planted, and that's the unhealthy piece, right? And so we really want to make sure that we, thank you, Paula, I see that we stop overthinking that, because then that's our anxiety knocking on the door, being like, oh, hypervigilance, let's go, let me think about all the worst case scenarios, and then I'm not going to do a dang thing, right? We don't want to do that. We want the change, because whether the change is going to benefit us like right away or maybe later on down the road, it's still going to help us. But I think we have to be unassuming as well. And that's the fun part about taking risks, is it's a risk because you're like, oh, it's a risk because it's different, right? But we have to take that risk with an unassuming mindset. So that's what I would say.
Thank you for sharing, Gretchen. I'd like to hop in here and share my own risk as well. So, the biggest risk I took was also in my youth. So, when I turned 18, I made the decision to actually leave the reservation. And I don't know if you guys have a lot of familiarity with reservations, but they are sovereign nations. They are their own individual states that they have, or their own countries, so to speak, with their own laws. And I do love my home. I love where I'm from, but it is a different culture. It's a different world. And so when I made the decision to leave, it was really hard on myself and also my family, because they're like, why are you leaving? And there's such a collective culture compared to, the United States being an individualistic culture. So the collective culture of, oh, we need to stay together as a group, or, oh, we need to do this. And of course, none of my family had ever gone to college before. So I was a first generation. I made the choice to do that. And then also being a deaf individual, my family was, no one's gonna, just because they didn't know, they didn't mean to not support me, but they said, no one's gonna support you, no one's gonna help you, can you do this? And for me, that really pushed me to, say, hey, I can do this, I'm gonna achieve this. And so that was the biggest risk that I've taken, to try to really just believe in myself, because I didn't have that family support. I had, my own support. So I think that's something too, is even if you don't have the support of other people, you can still take that risk by just believing in yourself and being able to do that. As a deaf individual, I was told that, I probably wouldn't graduate high school, let alone go to college. And so being able to be here and actually have a master's degree and achieve that is something that I'm really proud of to be able to do. And also building your own community. I got to build my own support through other people that actually supported my journey and, wanted me to get there and were happy with these risks that I were taking, because, I wouldn't have got there without that. So I feel that is the biggest risk I've taken, is, just believing in myself. And that can be so hard, because you do doubt yourself. And when you have other people doubting you, it's like, what do I do? But I think just believing in yourself is the biggest advice that I would give with embracing change, because the only one who really knows your limits is you. And if you push yourself, I believe that you can really achieve that. So I'll pass it back to you, Dr. Dave.
Inspirational talk there. You know, first, it isn't it fascinating how we're told something, like you'll never graduate high school, or you'll never make it on your own, or you'll never be taken care of, and yet here we are. There is so many possibilities in the business world as well as in our personal life, and I believe that I'm glad that the boundary has kind of permeated, through and through, where people understand that humans are living a human experience when they're coming to work, and that's why I think it's important to engage with people's curiosity as children. Not when they're children, but adults. We embrace or engaging them as if they're children, in the sense of making opportunity seeking like a conversation. Like, what is the opportunities you see? What is the big experiment, and provide space for them to do those experiments, because we feel like alive when we say, hey, I had this idea, I saw it through and through, and I wanted to bring it to you and see where we can take this. And I think that's something that is missing in some organizations, is making sure that you provide space for experimentation. So we've talked a little bit about, positive side. Let's talk about the unfortunate negative side of change. There's been changes where, uh, you thought it was going to work out, but it didn't. I'll share a quick story. I did a change 10 years ago, and my specific change was a change in direction of career. I've been involved in everything from law to um, specifically focusing on children with neurodegenerative disorders and providing support to them. And it blew up in my face. And let me kind of share what blew up in my face. An idea that I had blew up in my face because I was driven by what I thought the change needed to happen within my life, within my working life. And when I say blew up in my face, I'll be more specific. What happened is, I was moved off from the main team. The idea kind of fizzled. The business didn't go anywhere, and I felt just depleted. Like, all right, that's it. Never going to change again. I'm going to eat the same box of Cheerios for the rest of my life and not make any changes, so I won't have to deal with this pain. So now let's talk about the pain of change. How do you deal with that pain of change that doesn't work out when it's something that you really maybe attached yourself to? How do you find that balance again?
This is an interesting question, Dr. Dave. It this is tough for me in it to respond to because I don't want to be the person who is like, oh, silver lining, or oh, the glass is always half
Be
full.
you. Be
I don't
you. If you're silver lining, throw it. My wife is like that. She's like silver lining, and sometimes I'm like, okay, I'll hear it. So yeah, be you.
I mean, to be honest, like I don't really look back on my life, and there's really nothing that I'm filled with regret about or anything like that. Or I look back and be like, "Oh my god, that was the worst decision." There could be a couple things, but to be so honest, and this is the reason I hate saying this is just because like I don't want it to seem as if I'm just like forcing this gratitude on myself, and I just honestly think that every single thing that I have encountered, it happened because that's how it was supposed to happen for me. Whether I failed or not, the fact that I failed and still stayed on my feet and was still able to pick myself up and move forward, that's a win. That's not a failure. So I think there's a lot of this where it's kind of like, okay, I'll do like kind of a personal relationship example. I remember I was dating somebody and I asked, "What is your biggest fear?" And their response was getting my heart broken. And I could understand that. I could understand that for somebody, but I tried to figure it out for myself and be like, is that something that I fear? I'm just curious. And the answer is no. I don't have a fear of getting my heart broken or a fear of a relationship not working or even a friendship. I don't have a fear of entering into a friendship with somebody and then it falling apart. That's not a fear because I know that if that were to happen, Gretchen's gonna be okay. I'm gonna be fine. I will get back on my feet. I will cry my tears, whatever it is, or I will go vent to my friends and we'll drink wine all night, whatever it is. However, I need to grieve, cope, overcome. I'm just so confident in myself that I will be okay and I will be on to bigger and better things into the future. So the pain is just the knowledge, just kind of back to what Hannah was saying, is just believing in yourself and just being so confident that you are going to be fine and everything will work out in some capacity.
So we're all running through walls. Got it.
Yeah.
I'm now charged up. Hannah, go for it.
Oh, this is a fun one, the hard part of change. This is I don't want to say the ugly side, but this is the less seen side, right? We don't post this part on social media for everyone to see. We don't highlight this, and we keep it more secretive. We keep it more inside whenever we go through these hard changes. So the hardest change for me, I think, in my life so far was when I graduated from college and I had to make the transition from college to the real world and getting a real job. And I felt so discouraged from that because I kept getting denied. I probably applied for hundreds and hundreds of jobs. And on paper, I look great, right? 4.0, summa cum laude, things like that. But when people met with me, or when they would see me, they would say, oh, you have a little bit of an accent. And now that I have cochlear implants, I have much less of an accent, but I did have a bit of an accent before. um, and so they'd be like, oh, where's your accent from? And I'm like, oh, it's a deaf accent. Or they would say, oh, you need to talk on the phone. And I would say, oh, I need a TTYN phone. And they would be like, why do you need that? And I would say, oh, I'm deaf. And then they'd be like, oh, we'll let you know. And so I would see myself getting my foot in the door, continuously getting interviews, talking to people. But as soon as them finding out that I was deaf, I would be getting turned away. And so that took a huge hit on my self esteem, and that changed. And I was like, what's wrong with me? That's when you're left with that. What's wrong with me? Why can't I do this? And so I kind of had to reset my narrative and say, nothing's wrong with me. What the heck is wrong with all of you? That's the real question, right? So when you look at things like that, it's more so that you just have to find the place that you fit into. So that difficult change was more so me finding not only a company that liked me, but also a company that I liked and that I wanted to be with. And so getting through that difficult change and dealing with that was just acknowledging that, I am still everything that I am. I can still be confident. I can still be happy in everything with myself, but realizing that, maybe I don't fit into certain spaces. And, if you don't have a chair at that table, you can pull up your own chair. Or, you can build your own table with much cooler people that you actually want to hang out with, right? So I feel that was the hardest change I went through. And it was just really focusing through with, my affirmations of, talking positive to myself, and then also being kind to myself and having grace with myself and saying, I'm 24 years old. Back when I first graduated college, I was 24 years old. I don't have to have it figured out right now. I don't have to have my life planned in front of me. I'm supposed to be making mistakes at this time. So the hardest change for me was just accepting that, and accepting that I don't have control over everything. I can't control what other people think of me. But what I can do is I can create a platform to educate others on what deafness actually is, and what disabilities actually are, and what people are capable of doing, whether you think they can or they can't. Because oftentimes people will tell you what they can do, they will tell you what they can't do. You don't have to assume those things. People will show up exactly how you allow them to show up. And so I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned, is just being honest with people. This is who I am. This is what I'm capable of. I don't need you to assume for me. I can tell you. And it's just advocating for yourself. And then also, something I really pride myself in is I can advocate for other people who aren't comfortable enough or at that space yet where they want to advocate for themselves, because they do need that safe space and they do need that support, because I know I did. And if I would have had that support when I was younger, I feel like I, would have been 10 spaces ahead. But I'm also so grateful for the opportunity that I got to navigate this and learn this by myself. Because without it, I would not have found Life Guides. I would not be here today. And another thing I want to highlight is when I first came to Life Guides and I was in my first interview, I was reluctant to say that I was deaf, but I did. I was like, oh, I'm deaf. This is my experience. And instead of them being like, oh, well, we'll let you know later, they were like, oh, tell me about that. Or, that's really cool. Like, I bet your story is so interesting. Tell me more about your story. And that's how I knew that this was a place that I wanted to be at, was because not only was it an inclusive environment, it was an open environment that gave me a platform to talk about my experiences and to share my story with other people.
We appreciate your story. I hope I speak for everyone today. I've been seeing a little bit of what was flying through the chat, and yes, I do feel this. This is real conversations. Well, not to take anyone else's shine. We do have other organizations who have similar conversations. Shout out to you and all of the partners that we have, here at Life Guides, who are pushing this change across the board when it comes to corporate environment, how we're treating employees, how we are supporting each other just as human beings. Uh, we're creating a new level of consciousness, and that word doesn't get thrown around a lot. And in the scientific community, about 15 years ago, you say consciousness, they'll probably kick you out, or you're never going to publish. Nowadays, consciousness is everywhere. So, yeah, that's just how life is. But the consciousness is changing, because we are understanding that we're better together and we're stronger together. And when you talk about like your story, I was not only blown away hearing, both of your story, and we work together. Like we spend a lot of time together, yet there's still pieces that we don't know of each other. And when you actually sit and listen, just to be like, what has this person been through? And not just on the what have they been through so I can one up them and say, well, I've been through worse, the struggle Olympics is what some people call it. But instead, like, what can I learn from them so that I will change, so that I will be a different person? I can maybe elevate myself, to that next level, whatever that level may be. It could just be updating your level, your level of cooking skills, and you're connecting with somebody who knows you probably shouldn't, put a roast pollo at like 450 degrees. Going, that's not how you do it. You want to know someone who knows something about it. Otherwise, you're going to do it. Uh, we are, coming down to the last quarter of this session, and I do want to open up if anyone has questions. Feel free to pop them in the chat. This conversation is so needed right now. There's change everywhere, and and I'm open to be swayed, and I'm now swayed. Before I was a little negative Nelly, and between Gretchen and Hannah, I'm feeling a little bit more positive and looking at the silver lining and understanding that I can change what I can change, but not to look back at my past as a failure, but as a way of growth. And thank you for everybody in the chat too for your positive words. So I want to, while we're waiting, if anyone has any questions, I want to throw Bali one last question that came to my mind as both of you were talking, which is with change, you are, sometimes a different person. Gretchen, I can imagine after you had your son, different person. Just like you, Anna, probably when you graduated, different person than what you were before. I heard both of you mention about like being where you kind of want it to be. How does self talk like really factor into the changes that you make?
This is self-talk is really a common thing lately, and it is always the affirmations. It's how you talk to yourself, and I actually have a very close group of friends. One friend, we talk consistently about how I can help her love herself more, feel worthy of good things, feel worthy of being loved. She did go through a lot of kind of traumatic experiences as a child, and many of those things have stuck with her all into her adulthood, as it usually does for most people. And I think when it comes to self-talk, it truly is, you got to think about how would you say these words to a friend. If you're talking to a friend, like if I'm talking to you, Hannah, and you're and I'm okay, if I'm in a bad mood and I'm all negative Nelly or whatever, I got to think about what would I say to Hannah though? Would I say all these things that I'm saying to myself? Would I say that to Hannah? Would I actually say that? So that's just going to discourage her and make her feel down, and like that's not going to help her at all. So it's really switching your mind, and there has to be some sort of trigger of some sort to force yourself to stop and to think about the words that you're saying to yourself, because you truly have to be able in some way to stop yourself and say, oh my god, if I said these words to my best friend, to my child, to my mom, whatever, would this be helpful or harmful to that person? And if it would actually be truly helpful, then okay, then continue and make sure that it's spoken in a way that can still be encouraging and empowering. But if it's harmful, then you got to stop. You got to stop. And you got to rethink, okay, how can I frame this up in a better way? How can I actually say words that are going to allow me to love myself, to be forgiving of myself, to give myself grace, as Hannah had mentioned before. There are just so many things that we have to do to ourselves, a lot of the inner work, in order for us to be able to embrace the change, to be accepting of whatever the change that is happening, and be accepting of the outcome. Because I think it was kind of mentioned before too, is that there's so much about you can't change is going to happen no matter what, but yet here we are all the time talking about, oh, change is so hard. Is change hard, or do you just not want to change? Are you just satisfied with staying stagnant, like, or is that it? Because I don't know if change is actually hard. I feel like staying stagnant is harder, and then that there's no room for growth when you do that. But I think the self-talk is where it needs to start, and it goes all the way back to what Hannah was saying towards the beginning about just, being confident in yourself, and really making sure that you are doing everything that you can to show up for yourself, because if it's not for anybody else. This is for you. This is your world. This is your life. So you got to do what you got to do to encourage yourself, to empower yourself. And then another point that I want to say, as you were talking earlier, Dave, another thing when it comes to psychological safety is not just for providing a safe space for everybody around you. It's for you as well. And for you, if you're a leader in your company, if you're a manager, if you've got people that look up to you in any kind of way, you have to lead by example too. So the psychological safety is also you feeling safe and comfortable to share with this group of people, for you to also lead with vulnerability and empathy. Because when you do that, that helps to open up the door, and that really helps to increase the safety level that other people are feeling, because they're like, oh man, if Dave is opening up and he's getting vulnerable, I feel a little bit more comfortable for me to say it as well. So a lot of that too is what I would also call allyship, is advocating, saying like, hey, this is a safe space, and I want to encourage all of you. I want to encourage you to speak up as well. But if you don't feel comfortable, that's okay. I can speak on your behalf if you want me to. So I think there's a lot of pieces that go into that, and I know, well, the three of us, we could sit on the computer and talk for hours about all these topics, but I know we're running short on time, so I'll pass it over.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, I was just going to add in a fun little trick that we do on our team. I know Gretchen and myself have done this before. How many times have we said, oh, I'm so stupid? Oh, I'm so dumb. Or like, why did I do this? And talk negative to yourself. And internally with our team, it can happen a lot. And it could be something as simple as one little tiny mistake, right? So something we do is we really hold each other accountable. I say, Gretchen, you just said something negative about yourself. Tell me three positive things you like about yourself.
Mhm.
It's holding your people accountable too. And even if you don't have someone to do that with, do it with yourself. Catch yourself saying that. Because if you constantly and consistently tell yourself negative things about yourself, that's what your brain is going to think about you. As opposed to, in your head, if you, I don't know, drop a glass of water, you're like, oh, I'm so dumb. Like, why did I do that? Now I have to clean up water. As opposed to saying, oh, I dropped water. Accidents happen. Or even just saying, oh, I called myself dumb, but I'm going to say three things I like about myself to try to reprogram my brain to think nice things and to be kinder to myself. I really liked Gretchen's point about, talk to yourself how you would talk to your kid or to your friend or to, a parent. Because I really do think we have to work on those narratives that we create for ourselves. And also, one of the best things that you can do is connect with a guide, because often we gaslight ourselves a little bit and say, oh, maybe I'm a little crazy. Maybe I'm not good at this. Maybe I have imposter syndrome and I just don't think I'm cut out for this. Talking to someone is the best way to validate your feelings and then also be heard and know that, what you're going through, you're not going through alone. And also just knowing that you're not, crazy in your mind, as I know I often think that I am. I'm like, oh, my brain, everything going on. I feel so crazy right now. Or, oh my gosh, I messed up on two different things. My life is over. And I get into that mindset a lot. And it's really helpful for me to, take a step back, tell the story to a non biased party and be like, what do you think? And then getting that validation of saying, hey, like you're fine. Or them saying, Hannah, like maybe we should work on some things, because you do need that constructive criticism as well, too, with that accountability.
Wonderful. We need each other, and it really takes a community. And I think we forget how much of a global community. And there's nothing more beautiful than a well-traveled human being. And some people may not be able to afford travel, with technology, you can travel using your VR headset, travel watching YouTube, you can travel just talking to someone who is an immigrant. And that peer-to-peer support will unlock chambers in your mind or in your brain and connectivity that you didn't have before. And I like that you mentioned that, Hannah, that it is rewiring your brain in a way. People who are bilingual, I believe, have a similar superpower because they can shift between, different languages. And that's a part of being this global community that we are. So, as we close today, I appreciate everyone. Thank you so much for the comments. I mean, you guys have been on fire in the comments. Paula, Carolyn, I can't mention everybody. Angelo, Lori, Anshu, thank you so much. And shout out to all the guides within the community. Shout out to all the members. Again, if you're watching this, please share with a friend. If yesterday, which was what, July 11th, was actually National, what is it, Loneliness Day. It was on our well-being chart. And so, just say, hey, happy belated Loneliness Day to maybe your strong friend who doesn't really have someone that they can connect with, and just be there for them. Just listen, just be that ear to listen. It saves people. But I want to give both of you just a moment to say any last remarks before we end.
For me personally, I think all the cliche sayings, I guess you could say, is change is everywhere, constantly in everything that we are doing. Technology also, and that should be something that is celebrated actually. And I know it's sometimes even for the older generations, people tend to get annoyed with the changes in technology because they have to relearn something, right? They have to reprogram their brain. But I think that's something to embrace. I honestly think that any kind of change situation that comes your way, you have to stop and be like, how can I embrace this? It truly is forcing yourself to stop and think about, what can I learn from this? How can I improve from this? How can I embrace this? What are ways that I can accept this better? There's so many ways that you have to, and I don't know what the triggers are. I just think it's practicing. You have to practice recognizing a change, and you have to practice when you start to feel uncomfortable. Be like, okay, I don't like this, but why? Why don't I like this? Because it's different? Well, what can I learn from this different situation? So there's ways that you need to really start practicing, because practice makes progress. Practicing these things in your life so you can stop yourself from being resistant to the change and open yourself to it, being able to lean into it, step into it in some way. And I think that's really the biggest thing that I would say is try to be more open to all the changing opportunities that are coming your way.
I'll just take the different approach as saying change is hard, right? But a lot of times when change is hard, it's that growth. That growth can be uncomfortable. And I mean, it can be a good uncomfortable too, because you're growing into who you need to be for that situation. You're adapting into it. And so it's okay to be scared with it. It's okay to be uncomfortable. But it's also important to acknowledge those things and say, why do I feel that way? Like Gretchen was talking about. And then figure out a way how to successfully navigate that so that you can make sure that you get the full change, the full circle. I guess I'm trying to do the hand movements there. But it's definitely something that I've struggled with a lot. And I think every single time I've been embraced with change, I came out on the other side. And that's the positive thing that I try to look at is, it's not why me, it's try me, for the last cliche for you guys to have on this call.
I love it.
All right. Thank you, everyone. You all have a wonderful Wednesday. Make someone else's wonderful too. See you
Oh,
next time.
thank you. Bye.